as Jim Collins says, there are many things in common with a well-run business and a well-run nonprofit than a poorly run nonprofit and a poorly run business. So the idea is to really kind of share all those lessons across the board. So without further ado, okay, today is about, this is my disclaimers, okay? It is very much a primer. We're going to be talking a lot about the things that you should be speaking about, which then you could take and go into Google, Edge, whatever it is, and look further. So we're not going to be delving in. That's really, Cindy is going to actually take some of these things and really drive it home, but we're going to be giving a bird's eye view. This is not an instructional manual because, again, one size does not fit all. There are a variety, Israel, America, everyone's coming for a different perspective. So please, for the love of God, please do not act on anything without contacting your board, stakeholders, professionals, etc. But again, I hope to really provide everyone with food for thought, and hopefully everyone will come out much smarter from today. So this is what's essentially bringing us here today. Navigating financials and HR, primarily from the war, right? So maybe you've got too much, or unfortunately, maybe you have too little. Too much, thank God there are a few organizations out there that are really, either they're situated before or afterwards, that they really become a focus for a lot of giving, which is amazing. Unfortunately, we all know that it's a total sum game. If some people are getting more, some people probably are getting less. At the same time, what lessons can we learn, or what things can we think about that we're able to say for the future? If this happened to us again, how could I approach this from a stronger perspective? And because I think that actually, while navigating the finances and HR relating to the war is important, I'd actually rather start with a good foundation first. So I'm actually going to jump straight in. Excuse me. So let's talk about how we prepare. So I mentioned building resilience. This is understanding your DNA, who and what is your organization about, and practically speaking, and I really want to apply everything I'm going to be speaking is things that I work with my clients, or things that I've seen other people struggle with, or the opposite, have become successful because. So when I say knowing your official mission, as legally speaking, what have you been approved to do by the government? In Israel, it's very easy. If you're a local charity here, when you apply to be a nonprofit, you have to put bullet points. America, it's a little more difficult because there's a whole articles of incorporation. So it's in paragraph format, but it's still there. You need to know, because questions come at you, and I've dealt with those questions out of left field. If you have to start flipping through, speaking to lawyers, obviously it allows you to be that much less nimble. Bureaucratic all-stars, these are your lawyers and your accountants. You don't have to use them, but you have to know who they are. You have to have them in place. Again, if you have to start searching through your drawer or begging for favors, the ability to turn around on the fly obviously is going to be hurt. I like to say that when it comes to a CEO, your main job, forget about the books, forget about the marketing material. Your job is to ensure that in a year from now, your company, your charity still exists. That's it. Yeah, I don't care what field you're in. That's at least the way I see things. So having that focus on, no matter what's going on, that my organization in 365 days from now still needs to be around, that I find to be one of the best tools to help navigate. I should take that donor. I shouldn't take that program. I shouldn't. Should I cut back? Should I increase? That for me is always the North Star. Okay, and of course, avoid mission creep. This is in general, but how could I not put it in? The idea of chasing money, which perhaps really expands your mission too much, and like kind of has you putting things in, entering into an uncomfortable area, programmatically speaking. Okay, building resilience also means financial flexibility. Understanding program purpose, I don't mean in the esoteric terms. There is a great book website out there called The Matrix Map by Jan Masoka. I'm happy to provide links as well. But essentially, she says as follows: some programs will relate to your mission. They'll be what she calls the heart. Others will be your money trees. This is things that we know it's either a great campaign or it's a for-profit thing that you're running, which bring money in there. Obviously, the best are what she calls the stars, which is a combination of both heart and money tree. But understanding the goals of what your programs are supposed to be doing with it relates to heart and money will help you understand what things could be cut and not cut, and one of the ramifications do if you do have to cut them. Have a what if budget. This does not mean have an entirely 17 category detailed what if budget, but so many people after, especially, this is literally a story from a nonprofit client of mine. They show a donor around. The donor's like, "That's amazing. I love what you're doing. I'm going to write you a check. What are you going to do with that money?" If you don't have an answer, again, you don't have to go into the extreme details, but if you don't have an answer, it's a lot less impressive, and sometimes you can't roll with the punches. It at least gives you a kivun, a direction of how to take things. And what I think people should look into is a rolling budget versus a yearly budget. A yearly budget says this is our budget. It closes December 31st, starts January 1st, 365 days. A rolling budget idea is what happens if actually we revisit our budget every quarter and we adjust accordingly. If you're adjusting accordingly, it goes to say that actually you should be much better be able to handle things as they come in. A rolling budget, however, does require more time and having a little bit more control of what's going on, and it can't always be. But again, it's food for thought. Okay, now let's talk about what we've been seeing with the war with some people, some organizations that have been getting a lot of money. How do they ensure that they're using their money wisely? So understand, no one is forcing you to use all of your money. Sometimes, especially as charities, we view ourselves as like operators, right? Or we're viewing ourselves as extensions of our donors. We need to use the money now. They're seeing people in pain. They want the money to be used now. Again, you don't have to do that. If we think back to the goal of the CEO, again, I want to think about next year. I want to think about 2 years from now. In general, what does your board say about reserves? Some people don't want, some people do want. I know that people have an impression about what the Israeli government or the IRS feels about reserves. That could all be dealt with, okay? But if you think there should be reserves, what does that mean? How many months? 1 month, 3 months, only operations? What staff do you feel is critical? Have that conversation, and don't let the pressure of what's going on around you dictate how quickly you should do things, even if some of the market, when I say the market, I mean are the pictures that we're seeing around Israel today. Okay, it's taken you sometimes years, if not decades, to build up your organization. Don't jump in too much just because of what's going around. One of the things that people are talking about the war so much is there will be plenty of things to do. And what people are worried about is what's going to happen, not now, but in 3 months and in 6 months and in a year from now, when we're not talking about the war and we're not seeing, please God, and we're not seeing the destruction and the chaos. People are going to stop giving as much. So there will be plenty to do. Approach it strategically, and don't let outside pressures dictate with what you want to be doing. And of course, I would say invest in infrastructure. If you do have an influx, just understand and see your challenges now and how much better you could handle them if you took some of that money, 5%. Sometimes people like to throw around up to 10%. I wouldn't do that much, right? And invest in ways that can make you able to be much more effective and efficient in the future. Okay. Unfortunately, on the other side of the pendulum, and I have been in touch with people who have been affected, because a lot of the money is going towards the war, and it's all of a sudden now they're left struggling, as if running a nonprofit wasn't challenging enough. Listen, you always have to have an eye on what's restricted versus unrestricted funds. Restricted is with the donor says, this money is going to this program. Unrestricted says, I love you. Do whatever you want. I trust you entirely. Restricted doesn't mean that they don't trust you. Okay. But again, sometimes people are coming with a specific cause or program in mind. There was, I forget if I also talked about this later, but the whole idea of, I don't know if I remember what was happening in Israel in the early 2000s, but there was unfortunately a case where people had money left over in their bank account, but they couldn't actually use it. Because it was restricted, and it creates all sorts of headache, etc. There's lots to say about unrestricted versus restricted and legal obligations and contracts, but understanding in general from a bird's eye view, is this money for a specific cause, or can I go to whatever I deem will help you be able to roll with the punches? We can't always pivot as quickly as we need to. When you have to make decisions, we have to understand our contractual obligations as well as our name, our brand. Now, these are things that hopefully should have come up earlier, but before you're going to axe a program, you have to understand what the ramifications could be financially, legally, and again, causing saving face for your organization. And that's a conversation you should have with all your stakeholders to understand and get input on that, because it is a multifaceted challenge. As you are, thank God, as a number of people are experiencing those challenges, you should already know who are the players in your market, general. But if you're struggling, so other people are probably struggling as well. And this is an excellent time, especially if you've invested all these years for expertise. It's an excellent time to consider partnering with other people. In general, if it's a one-person run shop, it will be harder to be nimble and to pivot. So really take the time when things are a little more chill to develop the relationships with your stakeholders and your board. Okay, one of the biggest things we have to speak about is overcommitting. Not rushing to, now that I have all this money, that what's going to happen in 3 months or in 3 years from now when it's not there. I mentioned the Amutah, the Israeli crisis of the early 2000s. There was the second intifada. The rates were of the dollar shekel conversion were above 4.2. It's what I call the perfect storm. And what happened was that when the market crashed, the shekel started to drop, and you had people who were left with primarily capital projects, and maybe they had taken out loans because things were doing so well. These were the ones who were hurt. And this, I would say, is really the things that you have to keep in mind in terms of overcommitting. It's capital projects, it's credit, even employees. There are ways to minimize employees, even here in Israel, which is pretty strict. You have your 30 days. As well as, just like before, when we talked about if you have to shrink, partners, obviously scaling with partners enables you to minimize risk and allow you to focus on the things that you're specifically good at. HR hire, things to keep in mind. What does outsource versus in-house bring you, right? When should you bring people in-house? Obviously, that's a lot more responsibility. Sometimes it's more financial commitments. I like to think that really it's quality. Quality control should be your main focus in terms of outsource versus in-house. Outsource obviously does allow you to be more nimble, but unfortunately, you lose that quality control. It should be an ongoing conversation. Understand, legally speaking, what you need to do vis-a-vis the government. And I'll just say this as a side, this actually is in its own point, but understand you're not doing any favors by not firing people. I don't mean that to be rude or not be sensitive. The best thing you can do is put yourself in a better financial position so you can rehire people. That's good for you, and it's definitely good for all the communities that you're impacting. So think of it as one step backwards to take hopefully 2, 3, 4, 17 steps forward. And therefore, if you need to fire someone or a group or a staff, understand, hopefully it's all to create a stronger nonprofit, which benefits everyone involved. And kind of as we're winding down in terms of last notes, I do want to relate to inflation and currency exchange. So listen, if you're building a house, you'd probably put 10% at least, if not 20%, into flexibility, understanding that things break, things cost more, etc. Same thing should happen. Same thing should happen when it comes to inflation and currency exchange. With regards to inflation, you're probably less open to changes as with currency, and understand that not everything you have has the same inflation cycle. Understand that people, for example, it's yearly, right? There's a yearly review of someone's salary versus if you're in international shipping, for example, which charities are not. But I'm just saying, for example, right? So things that could be much more sensitive area. And that's why it's all about understanding the vulnerability. If things were going to change, we're talking about over weeks, months, or over years. When it comes to currency, we're not finance experts. None of your boards expecting you to be a finance expert. Look at what's the worst case. I like to bring someone. I had a client that said to me, I'm not a finance expert, and therefore I take what I think the exchange rate should be. I cut it by 10%, and then I cut it by another 10%. If we look at today, we understand that it's about 3.65. I would push for a budget, of 3.5. We have to understand that no one is going to be upset at you if you have money left over. But if you have to go back to your board because you've run out of money, that's really a conversation you don't want to have. And just to end, as the 15 minutes are coming now, I would say everything that we're talking about now can really be summed up into know thyself. Is to really already understand who and what you are, financially speaking, network-wise, government-wise. Think of a mantra. This is something to galvanize your employees to understand that your staff actually knows what you're doing. Nike is a great example. Their slogan to the outside world is just do it. but in terms of their mantra that they use to galvanize their employees, so that employees always know what is everything that we're doing, their mantra is authentic athletic performance. Any product that they do has to be appealing to that. Obviously, make sure that you have a good communication with your stakeholder. That's zero surprise. I invite you to have people come and meet with your staff, lunch, whatever it might do, to educate them about the communities that they're serving, so they really understand more about the communities that they're benefiting. And then again, you as the leader, finance person, it is lonely at the top, or is lonely alone, essentially. And really to create a brain trust, a group of people, 2, 3, that you can reach out to when these challenges do come, because they will. And hopefully, I'm wishing everyone that they are prepared at least for that, and they have a direction how to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shuey. For those who joined since the beginning of the call, the first half of the call approximately is devoted to 2 presentations. We just heard an overview of tips and things to keep in mind if you're experiencing significant budgetary fluctuations, either shortfalls or increases. And now we're going to hear from Cindy Greenberg, the president and CEO of Repair the World, for a case study on their own experiences with an increase in budget. I want to acknowledge that there are certain people on this call who may be experiencing currently a shortfall, but because the nature of the nonprofit sector is dynamic, and in particular for those who are working in international development or global volunteering or humanitarian aid, the context in which we work are dynamic. And so even if you're experiencing a shortfall now, I think there are important lessons that can be learned also from thinking about how you relate to an increase in your budget as well. And so Cindy will be presenting, and then we're opening up for a good 20 plus minutes of Q&A.
Awesome. Diana, yeah, Al, thank you so much for inviting me. It's such an honor to be part of this OLAM network. It feels so good to be on this call this morning with you, my fellow CEOs, and sending you all chizuk, strength, love. I know how difficult the job is, even outside of a work context. So just in awe of all of the work that you are all doing. Just by way of introduction, I run an organization called Repair the World. We are the Jewish service movement. We're based in America. I'm going to tell you our story. And as Diana said, I think some of it will relate, some of it won't relate, but I'm hoping to be able to pull out some key learnings from our story that I'm happy to share with you. Shuey there were so many gems in your presentation, Shuey. I wish I had attended this seminar before we received the windfall of funds. It really was a great framework, and hopefully the story will give a little bit of like a story time feel to what Shuey already shared. I also just want to acknowledge two of my lay leaders who are on the call, Martine, who is on our board, and Jonathan, who is the chair of our advisory council in Atlanta. It's great to be with you in this context. So I'm going to just start with the story because people enjoy it. It's a fun story. I got a call from a consultant who asked me all about Repair the World's work. We already had a strong strategic plan in place. So as Shuey said, be ready, knowing what your mission is and what your work is. I did a 30-minute pitch for the consultant, and a week later got a phone call from the consultant telling me that she was arranging a $7 million donation to Repair the World. At the time, we were only a $6 million annual budget. I was a new CEO. It was the beginning of the pandemic. As she told me this, I made her repeat it. I'm like, did you say 7? What was the number that you just said? I was so overwhelmed that I laid down. Thankfully, we weren't on Zoom. We were just on a phone call. I laid down on the floor and I said to her, you are either an angel or you are a prank caller. What is happening here? And a week later, the money was in our bank account. It has been, it's been about 4 years since that day. I've definitely learned, some important lessons. Ella's going to put up the deck, and I'll let you know. Yeah, we'll get started. So Oh, and by the way, the gift was from, if you've heard of her, from Mackenzie Scott, who was married to the owner of Amazon. So we decided to go on a listening tour to really connect with our stakeholders. And there were two reasons why we did this. One is we really wanted to get their best advice around how we spend the money. As much as a windfall of money can feel, like it's, as Shuey said, it's too much, it's an abundance. We also felt like there was a tremendous risk in the gift. We had a pretty serious momentum in growing our fundraising. And we were worried that with this significant gift, once we announced it, our donors would stop giving. They would say, "What do you need our money for?" Right? Like you have enough, and we're going to give to organizations who need it more. So part of it was to get our stakeholders' advice around how to deal with that risk. And honestly, part of it was to ask the very donors who had been with us to have them share with us their thinking around how we make sure that this doesn't cannibalize our other development efforts. And in doing so, it really brought them on board and bought their input and their buy-in for our plan. The key themes that and the key learnings from this whole process, one is to not create a financial cliff. So for us, we decided to spend the money over time and to basically ramp up and then ramp down the spending. And I'll show you in our budget how we decided to do that. A second piece was around leveraging the gift for additional growth. So we designated part of the funding as a matching fund for new gifts to support some of our strategic priorities. We created a reserve fund for a rainy day. In the US, the best practice is about 3 months of a reserve fund. I know it's a little bit different in Israel, and there are different opinions, but for us, our goal was to create a 3-month reserve fund. Some organizations that receive these large gifts publicize it, some don't. We decided to publicize it because we looked forward to the credibility that would come with the additional investment, and that has certainly been true. Other funders, knowing that we had received this gift, were, I think, more likely actually to give to us because of the credibility that came with this significant investment. And then very importantly, we decided to invest in the team. I think very important as an organization is growing, and when the team understands that there's money in the bank, for them to feel well taken care of. They are, of course, our greatest asset. And so it was important for them to see themselves on the plan and to understand that they are part of the organization's priorities as we grow. Let's do the next slide. So these were our 4 spending priorities for the money. 1, catalyzing our impact, which is basically an investment in program. 2, as I mentioned, investing in our team, including building out an HR infrastructure. 3, very important, telling our story. So we invested part of the money in growing our ability to tell the story, not just of our organization, but of the work that we're doing. And we also used it to build out a development team, so that our plan was, as we spent down the money over 4 to 5 years, we would also be building our own fundraising capacity so that we would be able to replace that money by the end of the 4 to 5 years with new fundraising. And then number 4 is securing our future. So that's building out our reserve. Our board went on a journey to figure out how to invest those reserve funds, and wound up finding a way to invest ethically basically in a fund that supports that doesn't invest in like things that harm society, and that actually does some social good with the investing. Do the next slide. So these are the highlights of our growth plan. We tried to put out an ambitious vision for how the money could catalyze our growth into our next phase. We moved up in our strategic plan. We had a goal of catalyzing 1 million acts of service and learning, and we set a goal to move that up to really demonstrate what the money was doing. Geographic expansion, growing our budget significantly and our staff, and building out our operating reserve. It was really a lot of thought went into how we continue to fundraise, even once we have the money, to ensure that we will be strong at the end of the spend down of the funds. So I wanted to show you this. The details don't matter as much as the idea that a key learning for us was to really invest in our fundraising strategy, which seems counterintuitive, right? When you have money in the bank, why are you focused on fundraising? But for us, it was really important to build out that capacity so that by the end of the spend down of the funds, we had a strong infrastructure in place to be able to replace that money and sustain our growth beyond the investment. This, I just wanted to show you the arc of spending. So inside the red circle, you can see the Scott Jewett Fund, which was the growth fund that we received. And you can see that we allocated it so that in the first year we were spending $1 million, and then 1.5, and then back down to $1 million, with the idea that in FY26 there would not be a huge financial cliff at the end of the spend down. And this relates back to the fundraising. Parallel to figuring out how we were going to spend the money, we continued to create a menu of opportunities for investment in our work. So this is just a sample of what we were showing donors at the time about pieces of our work that were not being funded. We were very clear, not just what the growth fund was going to be funding, but also what it was not going to be funding, so that we could create space for other donors to come in and to continue to support the work. So these are just, 4 examples of ways that donors could continue to give even while we were enjoying the support of the growth fund. And then we'll share this after, but two really important resources that I think might be helpful to you. Well, one is very important, the other is by me. I'm not sure how important it is. The first one is lessons that we learned at Repair the World from receiving the gift. And the second is an analysis done by the Ford Foundations and others of other, there's hundreds of organizations now that have received these large unrestricted gifts from Mackenzie Scott. And this is some of the learning from, across the field of organizations that have received it. So I think there's some interesting information in there as well. And we can stop sharing. And I just will say, like, the last thing that I want to share, like on a very personal note, is, I guess I just want to say that it's hard, right? And even when we have good news and there's money to do the very important work that we want to be doing in the world, like navigating these conversations and making decisions on how to allocate the funds aren't easy. I definitely slept. I felt like I slept better when I knew there was money in the bank. And then I wasn't worried about how I was going to meet, payroll each month. And it comes with a burden, right? The burden of knowing that we are being trusted to do good with people's philanthropic dollars. So just want to acknowledge that and share how grateful I am to be on this learning journey with all of you.
Thanks so much, Cindy. So now we're going to open this up to questions and answers and a conversation. We're a small enough group that you can either raise a physical hand or a digital hand or write in the chat. I see there's already one question, so I'll get us started by that. Adam, do you want to share that question, or would you like me to read that?
Yes, thank you. I can share it. Yes, so I'm the CEO of African Student Organization. We based here in Tel Aviv, and it's founded in 2017. So we are helping like African asylum seeker students to join higher education, specifically college and university. So from 2017 until now, we helped like above 60 students to graduate with BA and MA. And currently we are running, we have 20 students. And mainly we have only one donor. He has been supporting us, but because of war, so we have really struggled. And mainly now we are focusing with youth, those who were born here in Israel or arrived here in Israel as a minor. So we are facilitating them, mentoring them, and also working on language preparation, and also tutoring one-on-one, and we are running office here. So they are coming to the place to use the place to study and doing all this kind of project. So our one donor, because of the war, so he had other priorities, and we struggle now with the area of how to rent even the office for continuation, and also for supporting the tuition fees for the current students that they already started, which we have some of them in the first year, some of them in the second year, and some of them in the third year. And those who are studying at universities, like Tel Aviv University, Ben Gurion University, we managed to secure, like to find way to find scholarship within the university. But those who are studying in the college, because the college makes their living with it from the students. So it's very hard to find. And we have like some colleges, they have very high tuition fees also. So usually we support them, but it doesn't matter like to support them whole of the tuition fees, but even with partially quarter of it or whatever. But now we all struggle with this since the war started, and we don't know like what to do next step. So that's why my question, like what consultant can be useful for us. Thanks.
I'm gonna, was that addressed to me or to Cindy or Diana?
I think
So I'll
all
take-
of the above.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so first of all, obviously it sounds like you're doing great work, and you know, yeah, like just really blessings for it to continue, and hopefully you will be able to find a way forward. I think you're highlighting a specific challenge that anyone faces, which I think also Cindy was talking about, which is, well, what happens when a majority of your budget is from one single person? And by the way, that could affect anyone of any size when working with the government or private or foundations. We all know the horror stories, and that's not what we're here to really share, but it's a very real. I mean, I know that you're specifically talking about the war, but everyone here should understand that that could happen to anyone. Okay. Do you have shortfalls with your current students, or you're talking about how to get new funds for the new students? And then and if you just a short answer, so then I can kind of spit back out what I think perhaps might be a direction.
Wait, the question, you mean like if we are looking just for tuition fees?
Meaning when you say you're having the challenge is to cover your current students, or you're already thinking about the next cohort, the next group of students?
No, for the new, we are not accepting any new group student. We are now only focusing on facilitating because if we accept other students, we do not have any support for them. So what we
Sure.
are committing is only those who will get accepted and who are inside.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. So listen, the best thing that any organization can do is to take what they're already doing and try and think of a new community to do that with. So you don't have to recreate the wheel. There's lots of experience and expertise that you've gained along the way. The question is that knowing who you've been helping and what you've been able to accomplish, and I'm sure you're keeping numbers. And when I say numbers, it's about not just inputs, it's not just outputs, but it's also about impact, right? So can you connect the dots there, which I'm assuming that you can? Is there another community here in Israel that you could help out, that you could then take all that experience and expertise that you've learned and then put it in a different community? Ideally, one that is dealing with something relating to the war, because let's just call it like it is. That seems to be everyone's hot topic right now. And then I would use the and the legitimacy you can get with proof of concept in that new community to hopefully then piggyback and then get some additional money for other things that you're working on, with a pitch like, hey, you've seen what we've been able to do on such a short notice with this new community, relating to people from Gaza, the north, etc. Well, actually, our original purpose was, can you consider perhaps enlarging your gift? That would be in a very short. That would be kind of like my approach and kind of what I would think about trying to do. Pivot, apply lessons, and then hopefully be able to, come full circle and then go back to what you wanted to do, which seems to be your passion. Just basing, without making too many assumptions, but you seem like to be an immigrant yourself. It seems like you've been able to break through that glass ceiling and do so much, and kind of you want to pay it forward. So I think that you would love to see it come full circle.
We're going to open up for other questions, but I do want to say this is a small enough group, and I do know that at least One or two other organizations here also work in the asylum seeker space. And Shuey spoke earlier about partnering. I know one of the things you mentioned is challenges regarding office rent and other overhead. I'd encourage other people who are on this call right now to send you a direct message in the chat if they have ideas. And also I would encourage you, and you may already be in touch with some of the other organizations working in the asylum seeker sphere, which overlaps with OLAM and SID, but is not identical to that sphere. And some of them may be able to join forces on the things that you're doing. So that would be a direction I'd encourage as well.
On that, if I could just piggyback on that, and kind of it's hopefully you are maintaining relationships, and this goes in general for your funders, for your bigger donors, the foundations, et cetera, who are out there. If you are experiencing, and also you're treating them not just like a checkbook, okay, that goes with it without saying, assuming then you do have that good relationship, hopefully you should be able to reach out to them as well. The people who are giving you money want you to succeed in the long term. If you say, listen, I would love to speak to you, not for additional money, but because there generally is this position of mutual admiration. Excuse me. I wouldn't be surprised if some of your funders will also be happy to brainstorm and also to make that connection, especially when it doesn't cost them anything, but rather is about their network.
Other questions or financial thoughts on your mind, hearing from both Shuey and Cindy?
I'd like to ask, I'm Yonah Tanyarl, I direct the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development. That's amazing, Cindy, that Mackenzie Scott Philanthropies decided to make a $7 million gift to repair the world a few years ago. Is there anything that you did that, obviously, repair the world's amazing work attracted that gift, but now that mega donors are giving billions of dollars, is there any suggestions that you have for us in terms of how to make ourselves a fitting recipient of mega donors' support?
I was sure that once we received the gift that I would call, our most significant funders and board members, and that one of them would say, "Oh yeah, I put you on the list," right? Like I was on this search for the week after to figure out who it was that put us on the list. And I've definitely reached the conclusion that the consultants who work for Ms. Scott came to us through due diligence, through I think it was a few things. One, it was that we had a strong reputation. Two, I think we had a lot of press in that time. It was the beginning of the pandemic, and we had launched a massive pandemic response, so we were in the news a lot. And a simple Google search of like pandemic response, Jewish, racial justice, I think would lead you directly to repair. And third was that piece, just that when I got the phone call, we were prepared, right? We had the strategic plan. They asked me what our budget gap was for the next 3 years. I could answer them the same day, right? It was about being ready. I wish I could introduce all of you to Scott. The one restriction on the gift was that we're not allowed to share even the contact information for the consultant who works for her. But I've probably had 100 calls from really savvy fundraisers trying to figure out how to get to her. And there's no opportunity for renewal. So the exercise in making sure that we were financially sustainable at the end of the process was really critical.
Thank you.
Just do good work, I think.
I have a question for you, Cindy. What's something you would have done differently?
I can think of two things. One is I would have made sure that I had a very strong CFO in place. like part of rapid growth, and I would assume also rapid decline is the importance of having accurate and timely financial information, which our accounting department was just not equipped to be able to provide what we needed. And I wish I would have at the very beginning of the process made a change in our finance department. And I probably also would have gone a little slower. We we planned to spend it over 4 years. We overspent a little bit. I think I would have, if I had to do it all again, I would have made that 4-year trajectory probably 5 or 6 years. So we had a little bit more time to spend the money and have less of a cliff at the end.
I also have a question, maybe this time for Shuey. So we have a lot of organizations. Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Morkis. I'm the CEO of SID-Israel, for those who don't know me. We have a lot of organizations who are contemplating opening up. Their Israeli organizations are contemplating on opening up a US branch or friends of. And as you mentioned in your presentation, there's different things that apply differently for financial planning in the US and in Israel. How do you kind of bridge that gap, especially if you have a surplus? As you mentioned, some donors, or in Israel, it's considered one way, and in the States, it's considered another way. How do you bridge that? Do you create 2 budget plans? Do you, how do you bridge between those cultural financial gaps?
Okay, so I think you actually two questions, because at first you start off saying for those people who are considering, and then the other was kind of the second half was, how do you then, once you have 2 operations going, how do you ensure that you're kind of compliant on both? So first of all, anyone who's raising money in, let's just call it the United States for right now, you're an Israeli organization. Let's just stick to what everyone knows, kind of. You don't need to have a friends of to get money from the United States. And I would actually say try and push off starting a friends of as much as possible. It's not about raising money. It's definitely not about saving money, okay? Because those are all kind of washes. There are pros and cons to each. I would say for me, it is not having a friends of organization or a local representative who is speaking in your name with a business card that says, here's my legal entity. Is that lack of branding affecting your ability to grow your organization? If the answer is yes, then even if you're even if your budget, or you're raising $50,000 from the United States, it might be worth it. I heard a consultant speak, a fundraiser speak, or maybe it was a lawyer who said something like, it's only financially worth it if you're $500,000. Okay, because there's so much headache involved. Okay, but again, it's not about money. It's about branding. It's about the ability to be able to extend your reach beyond. And if that's being affected, that's really for me would be your primary concern in terms about opening, because there is that match that you're trying to do in terms of their different boards and okay, that's in terms of the if. To ensure that things are being done, one, at a DNA level, I would consider perhaps putting some people from the American funding onto the Israeli board. We've heard so many horror stories of where there's a severe disconnect in terms of culture, language, expectations, and having someone representative would really ensure that kind of both sides are on the same page. That's one. 2, with regards to reserves, Americans very much love reserves. The Israeli government very much sees amutot, which is kind of the Israeli name for charities here, sees them as like charity subcontractors, right? I'm Bill Gates. I'm McKinsey Scott, right? I have money. I want to go do this. I can't because I'm busy. I got a business. So I'm going to give it to someone else, and they're going to do the charity now instead of me. Americans, I think in general, have a much more long-term approach to how they view charity and charities in general. I will say, without going too much into details, there are plenty of accountants who specialize in nonprofits here in Israel. I would actually say in America, your best friend is your lawyer for your charity, versus a charity's best friend here in Israel is your accountant. Just in terms of like what government entities are sticking their hands into your business. It usually has to be the tax authority here in Israel. That's your biggest thing. Tax deductible status and whatever. That's a whole other lecture. There are ways to deal with having reserves. Whatever, you roll them over, you don't call them reserves, but there is, in general, I will say there is a way to ensure that reserves are kept, and at the same time, you're able to appeal to, demands from the Registrar of Charities from Israel's tax authority. Was there perhaps another aspect which maybe you were hinting at I hit? Okay, Yofi, great.
We have time for about 1 or 2 more questions. Once again, you can feel free to write it in the chat if you prefer.
I have a question. I mean, I know the American Jewish community has raised about $1 billion to support Israel in the war in new dollars. Is there a way for this network to leverage some of that funding?
Can you actually deepen the question a little bit? So I think maybe we can kind of understand a little more like the practical, like what.
Right. So I know that between the federations in North America and the various organizations that are, friends of, that more than $1 billion has been raised since the start of the war. Has this network, have we researched how that's being allocated? Is there an opportunity to make the case that the work that you all are doing, which is so important, while it's not directly supporting war efforts, is an important part of Israel's continued strength and recovery?
Some members have received from that money.
Yeah. So what I know is as follows. The number shifts all the time, but of the over $700 million that has been raised by the federation system in North America, close to 300 million has been allocated and 400 or so million not. Don't hold me on those numbers; those change all the time. Those of OLAM and SID's partners who are directly responding to the war in Israel, by and large, qualify. And many of them have, and within that group, have accessed those funds. For those organizations who do work outside of Israel and have stayed true to that mission, that is outside of the parameters of that funding. And I think there are legal ramifications for that as well. And so I don't know if that's fungible in any way. I wish it were, but I don't know if it is for those funds that have already been raised. I definitely see, I'll speak for OLAM, I think for SID also, there's case making and storytelling that can be happening in terms of, long-term rebuilding needs. What does it look like for there to be a vibrant Israeli society? And I see that as being really important. I would also just say that perhaps there is a role, I would want to give this some more thought, for some of the smaller entities that are working within Israel, but may not have access to or know of the RFP from JFNA, that maybe there's a little bit more access that we can help provide for some of the smaller entities who were not aware that they could access those funds. So I think there is some work that can be done, but unfortunately, for those who have stayed true to their mission and are Israeli headquartered entities but are working abroad, that's outside of the formal parameters of the funding that has been raised thus far.
We did a short questionnaire with many of our organizations, and we've seen, like Diana mentioned, a clear divide between those who are responding to the war and who've managed to increase their budgets, and those who have stayed within their professional parameters, as Diana mentioned, of operating around the world and not pivoting to respond to the war. And they have either just kept their budget balanced or have lost funding opportunities as well. Yeah. And both SID and OLAM have also tried to make those funds accessible, those JFNA funds and other grant opportunities as well. The challenge is with new entities that those foundations don't know. They'd rather give it to big organizations that they already know and work with, and that's a challenge that we find on a constant basis, not just now, but on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think it's really a really important work that you guys are doing. I haven't, unfortunately, seen one case of an individual organization which has received a tremendous surplus because they're working with the war that said, can we partner with someone instead of growing our own team? I have yet to encounter any of that, and I think it's, there's a Israeli phrase, chaval. I think it's really unfortunate because you have people, I'm seeing it, I'm just seeing the conversations or posts on LinkedIn, etc. And I know that people are recreating the wheel instead of looking towards their neighbors. And the work that, that Diana was talking about, or that other kind of umbrella organization are doing to get the money out and spread it around is just, it's really important.
I want to take this opportunity to thank Cindy and Shuey for joining us. Cindy, especially because it's really early in your part of the world, and thank you for accommodating Israeli schedules. And I'm going to turn over now to Tanya. We are going to send around a recording for those who are on the call and may have missed parts of it. Tanya.
Just another 1 or 2 words, and again, just to say thank you so much. I personally found it very interesting and it's insightful. These are questions and issues that we get asked a lot, and especially during the last couple of months, the financial planning strategy, thinking about how we manage our budgets is something that we get approached by a lot. So I think this was really interesting. Just to say that on the 31st, we have our second part of our meeting, which will focus on fundraising challenges. I think we kind of touched upon that a little bit here as well. But we're going to be speaking about financial fundraising challenges and opportunities with Mandy Winston from UGIA and with Aaron Zykis from HIAS. I can put the link in the chat for those who haven't registered yet. And who'd like to register and receive the Zoom link. So I'll do that, or if you want to do that while I'm speaking, then that's fine too. And that will be at 4 p.m. Israel time. So it's an hour after this one started. I know from I'll speak on behalf of both of us, Diana, but and on behalf of our teams, to say that we have an open door policy, easily accessible for anybody who has more suggestions for either additional meetups or webinars on these topics, or has ideas for us to share with our joint mutual communities, whether it's fundraising opportunities or dilemmas or other people that they think we should be speaking with in order to increase the capacities of our collective communities and the incredible work that you all are doing. So thank you very, very much. I'll put my email in the chat as well, if that's helpful. I don't know if anybody else would like to do that, and then we can just keep the conversation going. So thank you very much. Thank you again. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Yael and the team.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.